That just shows you how quickly she was working towards this marriage, that she had already decided to plan her honeymoon before the engagement.
The world was stunned when it was revealed that Joni Lamb, the once beloved Daystar matriarch, was suddenly fired. The shocking turn came after Joyce Meyer, a respected leader in the Christian community, revealed explosive details that no one expected. What was it that Joyce said that caused her to turn against Joni? And why was Joni suddenly facing such a public downfall after years of devotion to Daystar? Stay tuned to find out the truth behind Jonie Lamb's shocking suspension from Daystar. The rumors surrounding Joni Lamb. For years, Joni Lamb had been one of the most recognizable faces in the Christian media world, known for her role as the co-founder of Daystar, a network that had grown into a powerful force in religious broadcasting. But recently, rumors began to swirl, and the whispers behind the scenes grew louder. It seemed that the world of Daystar and the Lamb family was far from the picture of harmony and faith that had once appeared to be. The first signs of trouble came when Joni's behavior at the helm of the ministry started to raise questions. Those close to the situation began to talk about her increasing desire for control. Some insiders claimed that Joni had been distancing herself from others within the ministry, especially those who had originally helped build Daystar into the success it was. It wasn't just about running a network anymore. It was about keeping a tight grip on the power she held. Some reports even suggested that her leadership style had become more authoritarian, with others being quietly pushed out or sidelined if they didn't fall in line with her vision. The rumors didn't stop there. There were whispers of conflicts between Joni and several key figures within the ministry, including family members who were once close allies. Speculation about Joni's strained relationships with her children also surfaced, with some insiders hinting that her family had started to feel the pressure of her all-encompassing leadership. They said that behind closed doors, Joni was no longer the nurturing, faith-driven woman many had come to admire, but someone whose ambition was starting to overshadow the mission of Daystar. It wasn't long before rumors of power struggles reached the public, and suddenly, everything seemed to be on the brink of unraveling. Things took a more serious turn when Joyce Meyer, a well-respected figure in the Christian community, became part of the conversation. People began to wonder if there had been a fallout between Joni and Joyce, two women who had once been close allies in the faith community. Some speculated that Joyce Meyer had been increasingly vocal about her concerns regarding Joni's leadership, but those in the know claimed that Joni had been reluctant to listen. Meyer's followers started to question whether there was more behind the scenes than they had been told. Did Joyce see something that others didn't? Was this a personal conflict, or were there deeper, more troubling issues at play? As the rumors grew, the tension between public image and private reality became impossible to ignore. While Joni continued to present herself as the strong, faith-driven leader who had always been committed to her mission, the whispers behind the scenes suggested that her leadership had become more about control than about faith. Some speculated that she had used Daystar as a platform to build her own legacy, one that was too intertwined with her personal life and ambitions. The more the rumors circulated, the more people began to wonder, what was really going on behind closed doors at Daystar? How much of what the public had seen was carefully curated, and how much of it was a carefully constructed facade? One of the most damning aspects of the rumors was the suggestion that Joni had alienated not just her colleagues, but also her family. Reports began to emerge that her children had grown increasingly frustrated with her leadership, particularly Jonathan Lamb, her son, who had been an integral part of Daystar's operations. Some insiders even hinted at a rift between Joni and Jonathan, with the young Lamb allegedly feeling overshadowed and sidelined. There were murmurs about Jonathan feeling increasingly powerless within the family business, and these whispers only grew louder as he started to step back from his public roles. People began to wonder, was this the beginning of the end for the Lamb family's hold on Daystar? Were Joni's personal ambitions pushing her family apart? And then, when Joyce Meyer finally revealed more about the situation, it felt like the last piece of the puzzle had been put into place. The rumors, it seemed, were not just speculation. They were rooted in something real. The tension within the Lamb family and Daystar had reached a boiling point, and Joyce Meyer's comments were just the tip of the iceberg. The question on everyone's lips was simple. What would happen next? Would Joni continue her leadership of Daystar, or had the walls finally closed in on her? Would the Lamb family ever recover from the fractures that seemed to be growing wider by the day? The rumors surrounding Joni Lamb were far from over. In fact, they were only just beginning to expose the deeper truths behind the scenes. Joyce Meyer finally revealed. Joyce Meyer had always been a figure of strength in the Christian community, known for her no-nonsense approach to teaching and her unyielding faith. For years, she and Joni Lamb had shared a bond, both personally and professionally, that was revered by many. Together, they had been pillars of the faith community, both respected for their ministries and for their commitment to spreading the word of God. However, when Joyce Meyer finally broke her silence, it was clear that something had changed, and it was something big. The tension between the two women had been simmering for months, if not years. People had noticed the subtle shifts in their relationship, the cooling of what had once seemed like a genuine friendship, but no one could quite put their finger on why. Was it a personal falling out? A professional disagreement? Or was there something deeper at play? Joyce Meyer's revelation was the spark that set everything into motion. She had stayed quiet for so long, choosing to be diplomatic and avoid speaking out publicly, but the pressure had reached a point where silence was no longer an option. When Joyce Meyer spoke up, it was with a clarity that surprised many. She revealed that for years, she had quietly observed the changes in Joni Lamb's behavior, both as a person and as a leader. In a candid interview, Joyce opened up about the concerns she had long kept to herself, explaining that what had begun as a simple shift in dynamics had escalated into something much more troubling. "I've known Joni for a long time," she began, her voice steady but with an undeniable weight behind it. "We've worked together, prayed together, and built something beautiful. But over time, things started to change. The ministry that we all had once fought for seemed to shift in a direction that felt wrong. It was no longer about serving others, it was about serving one person, and that person wasn't God." The words hit like a bombshell. Joyce Meyer, a respected leader in the Christian community, was accusing Joni Lamb, the co-founder of Daystar, of using the ministry for personal gain. It wasn't just a subtle difference in direction, it was an outright betrayal of the very values that had once brought them together. Joyce continued, explaining that over the years, Joni had grown more and more focused on power. "It's hard to watch someone you once called a friend go down a path like this," Joyce admitted, her eyes downcast as though the weight of the situation was finally settling in. "But it's even harder when you realize that this person is no longer doing God's work. They're doing their own work, using God as a cover." There was a long pause as Joyce took a deep breath, as if steeling herself for what she was about to say next. "I tried to talk to her," she confessed. "I tried to reach out, to remind her of the values we both shared, but it wasn't working. I started to see a side of her that was unfamiliar, a side that was driven by something other than faith. I couldn't stay silent any longer." The shockwaves from Joyce's words rippled across the Christian community. Many people had long suspected that there was something amiss behind the scenes at Daystar, but no one could have predicted this level of intensity. For years, Joni had been the face of Daystar, a beacon of faith and inspiration to millions of followers around the world. But now, Joyce Meyer, one of the most respected voices in the Christian world, was essentially accusing her of using the ministry as a personal platform. The reaction was swift and intense. Joni's supporters were in disbelief. How could Joyce, a woman who had once stood by her side, now be turning on her like this? They couldn't fathom what had driven Joyce to speak out, and they were quick to defend Joni, saying that there was no way she could have been manipulating the ministry for personal gain. For them, this was nothing more than a personal vendetta or a misunderstanding. But the cracks in the story started to show. Some people who had worked with Joni, who had been close to Daystar for years, began to speak out as well, confirming the very things Joyce had hinted at. They spoke about the growing divide within the ministry, the increasing focus on power and control, and the subtle but undeniable changes in Joni's behavior. The whispers that had once been confined to behind closed doors were now out in the open for everyone to hear. As the days passed, more details emerged. Joyce's revelation had sparked a chain reaction, and now the truth that had been hidden for so long was beginning to surface. Daystar, once a shining example of faith-based programming, was now facing a reckoning. The accusations against Joni were too serious to ignore, and people began to question how much they really knew about the inner workings of the ministry. Was everything they had been shown just a carefully crafted illusion? Were the values Joni had preached for years really her values, or had they been distorted by her own ambitions? For Joni, the fallout from Joyce's words was immediate. She issued a public statement denying the allegations, calling them false and unfounded. She stood by her leadership and reaffirmed her commitment to Daystar and its mission, but her response only seemed to fuel the fire. The more she defended herself, the more people began to question her sincerity. It was as if the cracks in the foundation had grown too wide to repair with just words. The truth had been exposed, and now it was too late to pretend that everything was fine. Johnny's supporters remained loyal, but they were increasingly isolated in their defense of her. More and more people, even within the ministry, began to question her leadership and the direction of Daystar. Some of her closest allies had already begun to distance themselves, quietly stepping away from Daystar's influence. The power dynamics within the ministry were shifting, and no one knew exactly where it would lead. For Joyce Meyer, the decision to speak out wasn't easy, but it was necessary. She had tried to handle things privately, but when it became clear that nothing would change, she knew she had to go public. "I've spent years working alongside Johnny, and I have always respected her," Joyce said in a follow-up interview. "But when I saw the ministry becoming something it wasn't supposed to be, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I'm not here to tear anyone down, but I'm not going to let the truth stay hidden either. The ministry needs to go back to its roots, to faith, service, and integrity. That's the only way forward." The fallout from Joyce's words had only just begun. As the media buzzed with speculation, as Daystar's supporters split into factions, and as more members of the ministry began to reevaluate their loyalties, one thing was clear: everything had changed. The Lamb family, Daystar, and the Christian community as a whole were now in the middle of a deep and complicated crisis. The question on everyone's mind was, what happens next? Would Joni recover from this scandal, or was it the beginning of the end for her reign at Daystar? And would Joyce Meyer's decision to speak out be the catalyst for a wider reform, or would it only deepen the divide within the ministry? Only time would tell.
Hello, everyone. I wanted to take a few minutes today to speak from my heart to the Daystar family and friends. Recently, Daystar made the decision to terminate my son, Jonathan Lamb's employment. That decision was not taken lightly. It followed a 15-month review of Jonathan's performance and his refusal to take any steps to satisfy a detailed performance improvement plan put in place. He also refused my offer to participate in a formal mediation to resolve grievances in a biblical and professional manner. Rather than take any steps to improve his performance at Daystar, it seems clear now that Jonathan was focused on fabricating a smear campaign. You see, Jonathan was extremely disappointed that he was not named the future president of Daystar following the death of his father and my husband, Marcus Lamb, despite the fact that Marcus had given a clear directive to the family and to the board that I would succeed him as president. Jonathan's disappointment in not getting his way only deepened when I married Dr. Doug Weiss, who has been such a blessing to me, the rest of my family, and Daystar. I can tell you that as a mother, as a grandmother, this situation saddens me deeply, and it grieves my heart because I love my family. I love all my children. I love my grandchildren. I love the work we've done together for so many years. And I had hoped that we could have resolved the situation in private. But now, Jonathan has given me no choice except to speak out. Everyone knows that we have dedicated our lives to spreading the love of Jesus. And to see it attacked by my son Jonathan and his wife is truly heartbreaking.
Joanie Lamb's response to the accusations. Joni Lamb sat quietly in her office, her fingers gently tapping on the armrest of her chair as she gazed out of the window. The view was serene, the rolling hills outside her mansion a stark contrast to the storm brewing within her. For years, she had been the face of Daystar, the beloved co-founder who helped build the ministry from the ground up. She had been the one who stood beside her husband, Marcus, and together they created something special, something that changed the Christian television landscape forever. But now, everything she had worked for, everything she had believed in, seemed to be crumbling right before her eyes. The accusations from Joyce Meyer had hit harder than Joni had expected. The years of trust, the years of partnership, all boiled down to a few scathing comments from someone she had once considered a close friend and ally. Joyce's words, broadcasted across the world, painted a picture of a woman consumed by ambition and control, a woman who had lost sight of the values that had made Daystar so successful. Joni had been accused of turning her ministry into a personal platform, of wielding power in a way that was inconsistent with the faith she had once preached. At first, Joni had tried to ignore the media frenzy. She knew the public would latch on to the drama as they always did. But this time it felt different. This time the accusations were too close to home. They were personal. They weren't just about the ministry. They were about her character, about the woman she had become. Could it be true? Had she really let the pursuit of power cloud her judgment? The questions gnawed at her. In the days that followed, the pressure mounted. The phone rang incessantly, each call more harrowing than the last. Family members, friends, and colleagues called to express their concern, some offering support, while others chose to distance themselves. Joni could feel the walls closing in. She had always prided herself on being the one who held things together, the rock that everyone could rely on. But now, for the first time in years, she felt the weight of the accusations. She wasn't just fighting for her reputation. She was fighting for the very foundation of her faith and the ministry she had dedicated her life to. The decision to speak out wasn't easy, but Joni knew she had to. She couldn't let Joyce's words hang in the air unchallenged. She owed it to herself, her family, and her supporters to set the record straight. With a deep breath, Joni sat down at her desk and began to write her response. She knew it had to be powerful, but it also had to be sincere. There was no room for pretense or denial. She had to confront the allegations head-on and take ownership of her actions, whatever they were. In her statement, Joni began by acknowledging the hurt and confusion caused by Joyce's comments. "I know there are many questions right now, and I want to address them directly," she wrote. "For over 30 years, I have dedicated my life to spreading the gospel and building a ministry that would impact the world for Christ. I never intended for Daystar to be anything more than a platform for God's word. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of the core values that made this ministry great. I became focused on the wrong things, on building a legacy, on maintaining control, and on proving that I could succeed. I allowed my personal ambitions to overshadow my commitment to God and to the people who trusted me." Joni's words were raw, honest, and vulnerable. She admitted that she had made mistakes, that she had let the desire for power and control cloud her judgment. But she also made it clear that she was not the woman Joyce had described. "I am not perfect," she continued. "I have made mistakes, but I have always strived to serve God with my whole heart. I have always believed that leadership in the ministry is about humility, not power. And I am sorry if I ever made anyone feel like I was more concerned with myself than with the mission." But despite the honesty in her words, there was a noticeable defensiveness in her tone. Joni went on to explain that the accusations were based on misunderstandings, on a skewed perception of her intentions. "I know some people are questioning my leadership," she wrote, "but I want to assure you that everything I've done has been in the service of God and His work. I didn't always get it right, but I've always had the best intentions. I didn't want Daystar to be about me. I wanted it to be about the message we are sharing with the world." Joni also addressed the tension between her and Joyce Meyer, acknowledging that their friendship had suffered over the years. "I regret that our relationship has come to this," she said. "Joyce and I have shared many years of ministry together, and I have always respected her. But I also believe that there are misunderstandings that need to be worked through. This isn't just about Daystar. It's about our hearts, our motives, and the way we treat each other as sisters in Christ." As her statement was released, the media quickly picked it up. The response was mixed. Supporters of Joni rallied behind her, offering words of encouragement and affirming her contributions to the ministry. They believed that the accusations were an attempt to tear her down, to discredit the work she had done over the years. But others were less forgiving. Critics pointed to the contradictions in her statement, to the way she tried to shift the blame onto others rather than taking full responsibility. The public was divided, and the controversy only seemed to deepen. Joni didn't back down. In interviews and public appearances, she continued to assert her commitment to God and her ministry. She acknowledged the pain that had been caused, but insisted that the core of Daystar's mission had never wavered. "We are still doing God's work," she said in one interview. "This is just a season of growth, of learning. We will move forward, and we will rebuild. God's plan for Daystar has not changed." But despite her determination, the question on everyone's mind remained. What would happen next? Would Joni Lamb remain at the helm of Daystar, or would she step aside and allow for new leadership to take over? The ministry was at a crossroads, and the future seemed uncertain. Joni's future, too, was now in question. Would she be able to repair the damage done to her reputation, or would the fallout from this scandal be too much to overcome? In the end, Joni's response was a mix of vulnerability, defiance, and determination. She acknowledged her mistakes, but she also stood firm in her belief that her heart had always been in the right place. Whether or not the world would accept that truth remained to be seen. But for Joni Lamb, this was far from the end of the story. It was just another chapter in her ongoing journey of faith, redemption, and the quest for true leadership in God's service. The real question was, could she rebuild her ministry, or had the damage already been done?